Savages? Go out and capture a few Indians. Savages?
Sailgo, and welcome to Let's Talk Native. I'm John Kane, and it is Saturday, June 29th. I want to welcome you to the program. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and, in some cases, start conversations. We don't do prayers or buffalo speeches. We take a tough look at oppression, history, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity. And we may step on a few toes along the way. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that's heaped upon us. And we do it all right here from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind people that our audio streams on our website, which is www.letstalknative.com. We stream video of this show on Facebook Live. So if you want to catch us on live streaming videos, you can catch us on a whole variety of Facebook group pages that we share the show to. We take the audio and we post it up on SoundCloud, which puts it up as a podcast on your favorite podcast platforms. And we take the video of the show and we put that on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. So you can check out video of the show, and you can check out some of our short form videos as well as the videos from some of the things I do in New York City, my show. And in fact, this week we posted up video of the event that I host monthly down in New York, which featured Laura Coogee and Jeff Doreen singing Beatles tunes in Mohawk, some spoken word performance by Laura as well. And it was a good event, and so you can catch some of that video. We also broke out a few of the individual performances, both from them being on my show, and we'll break out a few more individual bits that they did, in tracks that they did from the live event at the Brooklyn Commons. So we got a couple of things we're going to talk about here in studio, and of course, I've got Ed Schindler back in studio. So it's good to have Ed back, and we'll chew the fat with him a little bit. But I do have to address something, and it's one of those things that gets repeated. Actually, sometimes out of New York, it is it's one of the things that I get confronted with, and it's this notion that somehow I'm an angry person. That I'm angry and I'm hateful, and that I hate all white people, and what else is it that I hate? Just a whole. Oh yeah, even the flag behind me. Somebody actually referred to it as a symbol of hate. All right, I guess we need to explain what hate is, because I am not an angry person. I'm actually a pretty good-natured person. I have a great relationship with the people who know me. If you hear me say something that offends you, and you interpret that as hate, then maybe you need to listen a little bit more closely. Because what I talk about is behavior that I find offensive, and some of that behavior, I will go so far as to say that I hate it. And some of that behavior is like racism, abuse of women, abuse of children. I hate those things. Now, do I hate the people who practice that behavior? That's even a stretch, because I think all people are redeemable. I think there are people who behave badly, and they adopt certain behaviors that perhaps if they're called out on it, they'll change. I mean, there is this whole notion of redemption. In fact, if you go back to our story of the Gonawida, the peacemaker, the whole story is based on the redemption of Taradaho, who's cast as the villain in the story, who is such an evil person. He caused the death of Hayawenta's daughters. And it isn't about hating Taradaho. It's about trying to comb the snakes from his hair, right? Straighten the crooks of his body, helping him redeem himself. And so we create a specific position for Taradaho or Aradaho, depending on whose language you're using. We create a specific position for that one title, which is one that not only is responsible, as Ed always reminds us, for creation, but is also responsible for the assembly of a Grand Council. He isn't represented by a clan. In fact, that's a clanless title. The person who sits in that title no longer has a clan mother. It is not it is the only of the 59 titles. It is the only one that's not associated with a family because it is a specific title. So that's how we, not only in the story of the Gondowida or the Peacemaker, do we demonstrate the redemption of a truly evil man, but we not only assist him in that redemption, we reward his redemption with and we could argue whether it was just about appeasing the ego of a man or whatever, but regardless, that's what we've done here. So the idea that I express my loathing for racism, and look, and I know that I say it all the time, racism's a white thing. That's not the same thing as me saying that all white people are racist. I'm just saying that the race that is as people define race, white people have cast themselves as the dominant race and have used this culture of domination to subdue and subjugate others. Well, that's just a matter of history. That's just a matter of fact. So I think to talk about racism and have anybody always assume that I hate white people because I talk about racism. No, I hate the idea of racism. I hate even the designation of trying to say that. I mean, there's no real genetic justification for even saying that there's even defining the distinctions of racism. I mean, obviously there's skin color issues, and we could also pick on eye color or hair color or straight or curly hair. We can do all kinds of other things if we want to distinguish people from each other. But to suggest that there's genetic superiority, which is what racism is about. Racism isn't the same as bias, like racial bias. And I talk about this all the time. You know, the difference between racial bias is when we look at somebody who we think is ethnically or racially different than us and we don't like them. Well, that's not the same thing as saying we're genetically superior, or just not liking somebody doesn't put you in a position of power over them. That's what racism is about. So when I talk about, my loathing or my hatred for racism, that's not the same thing as saying look, some of my favorite people in the world are white people. They really are. I mean, and I'm not saying that. I'm not saying, well, I have a white friend, so that means that this isn't the whole black friend turned on its head. No, I do not hate white people. I don't even hate white privilege. What I don't like is the fact that white privilege most of the time comes at the expense of others. That's where it's problematic. So I really have to, again, check people. The flag behind me, I know it's the warrior flag. It's the dreaded warrior flag. No, it's not. I mean, I know it's called that, but when the man who designed it as a unity flag. He used a symbol, which is the sun, which is something that all cultures at some level, all cultures have done some level of acknowledgement, if not worship, to the sun, the power of the sun. Look, our lives depend on it. And it is the center of our existence. We revolve around the sun, orbit around the sun. So, but the sun, to us, we've always referred to the sun as our eldest brother. And whether you want to call him a warrior or not. And we talk about him as in the male gender because the sun, like men in our culture, travel. It travels from it rises in the east and sets in the west. And that was more of a male characteristic and a function of men to travel and be on the road and go travel from community to community. So the symbol is not just the sun, but of a male figure. And the male figure is generic. It's not one feather to represent a Seneca. And it's not a misnomer to say, wow, that's the Mohawk flag and they got it wrong. They didn't give him 3 feathers. No, the reason Louis Hall designed the flag with one feather was to be a more generic representation of a male figure. Because many, many native cultures utilize feathers as some symbol of adornment, whether it was for labeling, which I think we go a little over the top with the whole one feather, two feather, or one feather, three feather, one feather up, two feathers down, all that stuff. Look, I know that's a general principle, but I think we place like an ownership or something on that stuff. But so no, it's not a symbol of hate. It has become a symbol, and it was intended to be a symbol of unity, but it has become a symbol of resistance. And I think it's important that people understand there's a difference between resistance and calling out and fighting injustice and hating. And I think that look, and I don't make any apologies for me being a strong voice against these things, but it is a complete mischaracterization to suggest that I am a hateful person, that I'm an angry person. Will I stand up? Absolutely, I will. But most of the time, anybody who knows me knows that I'm a reasonable, an easy person to talk to, and I'm willing to have a conversation. Even if I feel strongly about something, I'm not going to be dismissive or disrespectful to somebody who has a different opinion. I want to break it apart a little bit. I'm not trying to empathize necessarily, but I am trying to understand. I'm not trying to become somebody else. And so when I talk about the things that I talk about, look, I don't hate the fact that Native people have enlisted in the armed forces, but I do talk about how it is inconsistent with our culture. I don't hate the fact that Native people have adopted Christianity or any other belief systems. I don't hate people who've run for office. I don't hate people who have voted in, I don't even hate people who could be labeled categorically as sellouts or completely assimilated. You know what? I don't hate people. They've adopted, perhaps a belief system or a path that they think serves them well. And we can debate that too. How well I'm not sure how well some of that path serves anybody. But anyway, I wanted to address this issue, and I wanted to address it strongly. But again, I want people to understand that I'm neither consumed by hate nor a hateful or angry person. I'm actually good-natured. Look, even on this program, I try to smile a lot. I mean, maybe people think I'm just faking it. I don't know, but no, I am a good-natured, very supportive, and generous person with my time and with my efforts. I mean, so again, I'm not trying to brag myself up, but I will say that I think characterizing me as an angry or hateful person is just wrong. But I will engage somebody in a spirited debate on the issues that I feel strongly about, and so we'll leave that there. So again, let me now introduce my friend Ed Schindler back to Let's Talk Native. It's been a while, so I'm glad to have you back. I picked you up at the airport the other night. You helped me have an all-nighter that night.
Yeah.
Not only did I pick you up at the airport late in the evening, but when I got you home, I had to turn around and go back and catch my train to New York. So that's the way we did that. So anyway, Ed, I don't know if you want to weigh in on any of the stuff that I talked about, but certainly I'd like to give you a chance to reintroduce yourself and welcome you back to Let's Talk Native.
I think it's important for people to understand some concepts that have been forgotten or some things that people have left out as of importance. And it's really important to understand things such as stirring the ashes, to understand, to be part of and start the fire again in order for people to understand where things stand in their world, in their thoughts, okay? And then understand how they got that. Because that's just understanding yourself, okay? Understanding other people will be helpful, but you have to understand yourself first. And that is of a great importance. And people have to realize that was a basic foundation of the culture of the Haudenosaunee, because the people had to learn how to communicate, and they did so. Because in order to do that, They had to be able to understand where they were coming from. That's important because the reason that was being done was the seventh generation. And we have to keep that in mind and understand things. That's, I think, of a great importance because it really helps to understand things if we understand why we're doing things.
Well, and again, I think people sometimes misinterpret what that concept is about the seven generations, and it isn't the main message with this concept of being aware of our responsibility to those faces we will never see is that we do. First thing is do no harm. I mean, it's not like we're trying to prepare the world for the faces we're never going to see. We have a responsibility to do no harm, and it's to make sure that when we do make decisions, that we do consider the impact of those decisions that impact not only on us and on the next generation or the 2 or 3 generations that we may see our children or grandchildren, but the generations that we will never see. So when we understand that, we all of a sudden we take a different approach to what we're willing to sacrifice during our lifetime, because we understand that sacrifice, what we're willing to destroy on the planet, what we're willing to the permanent changes that we not only adopt to our people or with our people and our family, they may be hard to recover for future generations. And so if we don't take those things into consideration, then we're absolutely not being the responsible human beings that we should be.
Mm-hmm. I think all of that comes down to learning how to learn, because that takes communication. It also takes, you carried out experience. It's not just learning how to remember something, it's actually learning how to do it. And
again, I always say that the difference between beliefs and knowledge is that beliefs are something that somebody teaches you to remember, and then you adopt what somebody else told you. But knowledge is what you experience. So I'm not saying that somebody can't teach you something and plant something in your head so that when you experience that, when you cross that bridge and you say, oh, that's what somebody else taught me. I was taught about this. So now that belief can become experience, but oftentimes we can put a certain level of value and almost too much value on a belief, and not even really appreciate the fact that sometimes those beliefs are in conflict with what we experience. And this is that cognitive dissonance that I talk about. We have to understand that look, some things just have to make sense in the world that we live in, and then we have to, again, when we take into consideration the 7 generations, understand that, well, all right, that makes sense for me today, but will it have, what will the impact be in the future? And I think that's, and you mentioned the stirring of the ashes. The whole idea of stirring the ashes is about getting people to participate, getting people to understand, and not either be marginalized and let their opinions or again, when we stir ashes, what we do is we almost reignite the colder embers, right? When we stir the ashes, we'll air get to some of those embers that have gone cold, that have gone dark. So there's 2 things that we do with that. One is that we make sure those people who we haven't heard from or seen now have light, and we try to draw some of that from them, and we try to express a value in their participation, in their opinions. Now, the other thing, that the flip side of that is, we oftentimes see people who will stand back and they'll never weigh in. They'll even when they have an opportunity to speak up, they don't. And then you'll hear them bitch about things later on, right? They'll complain. Well, yeah, I wasn't a part of that decision. Yeah, but you were in the room. I mean, I hear people say that here in the Seneca Nation, for instance. I hear people say, "Well, I didn't vote for that person." Yeah, but you participate in the process. You may complain about the Seneca Nation, but you'll cash your check, each month that you get. There's, at some level, it isn't enough just to complain. It's about being a part of a process. And you know what? The process, I don't mean just the political process. I mean the community process. So when I talk about decolonization or when I talk about resistance, I'm not just saying resistance isn't just about identifying the enemy and taking on that enemy. Resistance is saying, no, I identify the problem. And the problem is something that we need to confront. Or if not, maybe confront sounds too antagonistic. I don't know. If not confront, the problem is something we have to work to resolve or to come up with some means to mitigate a problem, or to get through a problem. Because, look, there's some things that happen in life that are unsolvable, just like there are some things in life that are unknowable. But we find a way to get through the problems that we can solve and the problems that we can't solve. And I'm not just saying we pack it away and we hide it or cover it up, but we find a way to get through it. And sometimes we do, we just ignore a problem. And so we think we've gotten past it, but it comes back to haunt us. When we talk about substance abuse, for instance, look, the opiate, problem is a very real problem, but it's not new. Look, we could attribute some of the same consequences, including death, with the alcohol problems that plagued our people since white men used it as a weapon against us. And I'm sorry, but that's the truth. It was used as a weapon against our people. And so substance abuse and addiction is not just new. I mean, it gets a lot of the reason the opioid problem gets so much attention now is because white people have to confront it. I mean, look, crack cocaine didn't get the attention that that the opioid problem does. Why? Because we could attribute black people and crack cocaine together. Well, that's not our problem. So alcoholism. If you can just look at Native people and say, yeah, Native people, they're just a bunch of drunks. Well, now you can cast that whole notion of alcoholism and that kind of substance abuse on the other. But all of a sudden, between pharmacies, administering or doctors, I should say, prescribing, these OxyContins and all these, other opioids, and then there being a cheap way to not only take heroin, but with fentanyl and mixed with it. Now you've got this deadly combination. And you know what? It started affecting it wasn't just black people and brown people. Now it was white people who were having this problem. So now it's like, oh, we need to treat it with, we need compassion and we have to treat, the opioid addiction. But it's funny, you didn't have a problem locking up, Native people and black people and brown people, when it was crack cocaine or when it was, alcohol abuse.
Or marijuana.
Or marijuana for that matter. So I think it's about putting things in its proper perspective, I guess. And that's part of the conversation. I'm not trying to hate on anybody, but I'm just saying maybe we need to have a broader look at some of these things. That's my view.
Mm-hmm. My view is simply, like we said, stirring the ashes is bringing people to participate. And in participating, that's an actual experience. It's not just hearing people, it's experiencing. And in doing so, we learn. Mm-hmm. And we can learn some things that we can do as a people. And that's, I think, something that we all have to learn.
Well, and the other thing is, the more participation you have in a problem, it forces us to own the problem a little bit. And it also means, look, maybe we don't come up with a good solution. Maybe collectively, even as we reach consensus on an issue, we're wrong. And you know what? We have been wrong. I mean, and I don't want to suggest Native people got everything right. We did some of the same mistakes that white people did. We created urban centers. And we had environmental problems because of it. When you pack, 100,000 people into a community, you got to figure out how to deal with waste, how you have to deal with, with getting enough fuel for your fire or getting enough food for your people. We did some of those same mistakes, and we did those things collectively. So I'm not suggesting that when you stir the ashes, you're always going to come up with the right answer. But the likelihood is, when you use the collective thoughts and you bring people's minds together, you're more than likely going to come up with a better solution for a problem than if you try to impose a solution on people. And that's kind of where we come back to the conversation about resistance. For me, I don't like the idea of having somebody else who hasn't been successful at fixing a problem try to impose their methodologies for a solution to that problem. And I think that's where we come back to. So, I think these are all, I think using some of these metaphors and some of these principles that are ours, stirring the ashes, 7 generations, some of these things that have been a part of our history and our culture and our ideology, I think that they are still valuable. And if we don't begin to understand that some of the solutions that have been imposed upon us were never really meant to be solutions in the first place. I mean, let's face it. The first thing that our people were confronted with this notion that white people thought we were animals. We were primitive at some level. I mean, and because of that, they thought the first thing they had to do was to break and rip away our character, our cultural or our national character. So we're gonna do away with this heathenism and this paganism, and we're gonna impose the Bible on you. We're going to not let you live off the land the way you have. We're going to teach you how to farm our way, even though apparently you farm fine without us. But we're gonna make you do it a different way. We're gonna make you, eat a different diet, one that we can put you on a smaller plot of land and throw a bunch of pigs in a pen and tell you that's what you got to eat. No, you don't need 1,000 acres to hunt buffalo or deer or whatever else. You don't need to do those things. We're gonna manage you in a way that's going to make your land available for the taking, and make you not necessarily self-sufficient, but dependent on a system that we impose upon you. I mean, and that's a reality. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we'll take a break when we come back. Again, we got Ed Schindler in studio, and we're trying to dispel some of the myth about hate, and bring some other ideas to the table. This is John Kane with Ed Schindler, and this is Let's Talk Native.
So calm to me. Love in the water, it comes so naturally. It's a gift from my mother, can't deny. The day we lose it is the day, that's the day we die. souls to the very last drop.
Thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. I've got Ed Schindler in studio. Hey, a couple things. First, let me go ahead and thank our sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises. There is another sponsor out there who chooses to remain anonymous, I guess, or doesn't want the praise for it. But I always feel like I can't leave that out. I don't want to pretend there isn't another sponsor, even if I don't need to give them the props for it. I will say I do welcome those of you who, on occasion, make a contribution to the show, or whether you send a check in or however you do it. I do appreciate those of you who step up from time to time. It helps. Look, we have those guys who do something every week or every month, and they help us, pay the bills and keep enhancing a little bit what the product that we're trying to deliver here. But every time somebody does even the smallest of gestures to help support the show, it all helps. We put it to good use here. So I want to thank all of you for that. I also want to thank those of you who share the show, whether you share the podcast or the videos, whether you share the video live streaming on Facebook. I want to give special props to my wife for sharing the show on a bunch of Facebook group pages. But I also want to thank those of you who are administrators to those pages that allow us to share the show on there. So that's how we spread the conversation. And in some places, like today, or even the last show when I talked about decolonization not being this scorched earth policy that we're recommending, I think it gives us an opportunity to provide some clarity and a better explanation, because sometimes things get mischaracterized. So again, thanks for the support, and thanks for giving us an opportunity to spread our message. Look, I also want to thank Laura Coogee and Jeff Doreen for making the trip to New York. They not only appeared on my show, Let's Talk on WBAI, but we hosted an event at the Brooklyn Commons, which is on the ground floor of the building that our radio studio is on. And we had a really nice time. We've posted some of the video of their performance on our YouTube channel, so by all means check it out. Jake's going to further break out some of the individual songs and pieces that Laura and Jeff did, so we can share them on their pages as well. Interesting thing that happened, and I mentioned this before, but so Jeff translated Blackbird. It was the first song that he translated. Maybe we'll even go out with Blackbird here. Jeff translated Blackbird like in 6 or 7 years ago, and it's the first Beatles tune that he translated into Mohawk, and he's performed it, and he recorded it. In fact, we've got a great recording that he did right in our WBAI studios, and of course, he's performed it on our stages at the Brooklyn Common a few times, and and he's gotten probably 6,000 shares and views, and and people have seen it. But then Emma Stevens, who is Mi'kmaq, did a video and of Blackbird in that was translated into Mi'kmaq. I don't know if she translated it or somebody else did, but she performed it, and it was a well produced video. Obviously, she had some some support and some backing to do the thing, and And that one's gotten almost 1 million views. Now, look, I don't begrudge the fact that that Emma's video got a bunch of attention, and I understand that part of it is, look, she's an attractive young lady, and that kind of increases the appetite for consumption on social media. So I get that. But even Paul McCartney was aware of Emma's performance of Blackbird and mentioned it on stage at one of his concerts. And and I just, the whole idea that Jeff hasn't gotten the notoriety that say Emma Stevens has gotten, I find that a little bit unfair, I guess. And it's not to begrudge her. She did a great job, and I think her version of Blackbird is. I encourage you to check it out. But let's not ignore the fact that Jeff's done a great job, and he's been doing not only this song but many other Beatles songs, including some he did Across the Universe, a great John Lennon song. So I can sympathize with that, because there are some issues that I talk about here, like Doctrine of Discovery, that I don't get nearly the hits that say, I hate to bring up Mark Charles' name, but I've got to. He's out. He's doing TED Talks. He's putting video after video after video, and he's got tens of thousands of views. And guys like myself, even Stephen Newcomb hasn't gotten the notoriety that this guy has gotten. So it's like it doesn't even make sense, especially since guys like Mark Charles, even on the show, says, "Look, I got to give all props to Stephen Newcomb, because he's the one who taught him, through his book." Although he seemed to kind of miss the subject a little bit. But anyway, look, I don't begrudge people who have success on social media. Frankly, guys like myself or even Jeff Doreen, I don't think we're trying to compete against squirrel videos or kitten videos. We're not trying to get a bunch of people to think that we're cute or attractive. Oftentimes we're trying to make a statement with what we're doing. And even Jeff's, Jeff understands where Blackbird came from. When Paul McCartney wrote the song, the idea of referring to it was common in England to refer to a woman as a bird, and nothing wrong with that. It was nothing derogatory about it. And the song Blackbird was about his encouraging black women to take their broken wings and learn to fly. This was an encouragement to oppressed women, but black women in particular. And so that was also part of what Jeff talks about when he performs the song. He says, "Look, I share that message. It isn't just that it's an appealing song. There's a message behind it." So again, we get that, and we're trying to share that message. So look, we love the good work that guys like McCartney and Lennon did with music and in the messaging, and again, I applaud the work of that Emma did in getting a Mi'kmaq version of the song and doing a fine job performing it. Just remember that there are other people that are delivering the message as well. So anyway, I wanted to get that out there. All right, Ed, we talked before the break a little bit about racism, and you mentioned during the break that it's important that people understand that racism, while it's an ideology that some people adopt in spite of all the evidence that suggests that there is no racial superiority, genetic superiority, but because it becomes an ideology, they can make it into something by skewing the systems that can favor one race or one segment of society over another. But beyond the ideology are the racist acts that people commit. And you said, well, racism isn't just a belief. It is an action. And you're right. Although what I will say, and we talked about this during the break, I think there are people who that I wouldn't characterize as blatant racists that still do racist things. And I think this is a conversation that needs to be had. And the reason for having the conversation is to kind of distinguish the difference between the ignorance of racism and the willful ignorance of racism. Because it is entirely possible, because of the conditions that people were raised in, they can you know, adopt a racist behavior, never fully grasping the damage that it causes, or that it is a racist behavior. But once you enlighten somebody and you explain something to somebody, you teach them that a phrase or an expression or a specific act or the view that people have of people of color is skewed based on this systemic nature of racism, then that's when you can begin to separate the people who, once they learn, they say, oh, yeah, you're right. I mean, I talk about the doll test in the past, right?
Yes.
And this whole idea that even black children, because of society, when they're presented, so when you take a 4-year-old child, regardless of color, when you put a black doll and a white doll in front of them, and you ask, what's the good doll? Invariably, they choose the white doll because it's already been ingrained in their head that somehow being black is not as good as being white. And even the black children. So when people ask, when we talk about, cops and the fact that, that death by cop is sometimes at the hands of a black cop, even for a black man. Well, that's because they have been ingrained with this notion. And until you can begin to educate people and say, look, there's a bias. There's a bias that we have been, that's been imposed upon us by society. But once you become aware of it, then now you can begin to adjust your behavior. Look, even though it may be ingrained and embedded in you, if you can make a conscious effort to not exploit white privilege or not exploit, a racist ideology, sometimes it's hard. I mean, and look, you'll hear it slip out of people all the time, right? I mean, you'll hear people say an expression or, we can be self-deprecating, right? We can look at our own people and view them as somehow less. I mean, we talked about this before, right? Look at how so many of these nations will defer to their hired lawyers and lobbyists and consultants. Yes. Why? Because they're white professionals, and even if they're native, they have been shaped by the white profession. So we'll put a higher value on white people because we're still laden with this idea that we're somehow inferior.
Mm-hmm. There's the one that you mentioned also was he's off the reservation, or he's way off the reservation.
Yeah.
And people don't seem to understand that. I hear that on news programs. I hear it on sports programs. And people don't realize that was actually a saying, because the United States passed a law stating that if any Native Americans were caught off the reservation, they could be legally eliminated, killed.
They would be labeled as hostiles.
Hostiles?
Because if you were hostile, then you were fair game for your prey. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, we can go back to the idea of scalping and taking taking native scalps. That was all part of that whole idea, because a native person who was off the reservation was automatically viewed as an enemy combatant, and
he could be eliminated.
And that was considered a wild or an undisciplined. So when they use that expression, when white people, when talking heads on the news use it, when they say, well, somebody went off the reservation, it means they didn't conform. It means that they have broken out of what is socially acceptable, and that they have, and now they are considered unruly. And that's that. So that is a very racist commentary to make. And yet, talking heads say it all the time.
Yes. They still say it. And the person is acting wild. Why? Because he's trying to get back to the reservation. So he can't be killed, legally at least. Okay, yeah. So he's scrambling to get back. And that's why they're talking about he's wild he's way off the reservation.
Or they've said, no, I'm not going to be contained. Let's face it, these reservations were like prison camps. We hear a lot of talk about concentration camps now, right? With these children that are being, oppressed at the border and that kind of stuff. But, and I hear people say it all the time. Well, the concentration camps were were built for for Japanese internment, and they actually had concentration camps for any variety of immigrants that came to to this hemisphere. But the the real model for concentration camps came from what they do with Native people, literally imprisoning us on what they called reservations. And most of the time, when they referred to a reservation, it was lands that they reserved, that the federal government reserved for placing Native people on those territories. Of course, we hear although we don't use, we're not quite comfortable with the use of that term reservation. When we do use it, we're talking about lands that we reserve for ourselves. These are the lands that we did not cede legally or illegally or have defrauded from us. So, yeah, I mean, and that is a classic example of a racist commentary or phrase that is used all the time. And again, you wouldn't hear somebody talk about somebody, oh yeah, he's off the plantation. You wouldn't hear that. And again, I'm not begrudging my black brothers and sisters, but fortunately, there is a better. It's easier to distinguish what is a racist comment when it's associated with black people than with Native people, because I say this all the time. There's a distinction in the racism that Native people feel, and there's almost a level of acceptance about referring to Native people as with derogatory terms like redskin or savage,
or like Trump uses Pocahontas.
Yeah, or making even using a basic name as an insult. I mean, we're gonna come up here. Look, we're the last days of June here, and of course the first holiday of July is for the United States is celebrating their Independence Day. And last year, it's kind of funny. One of the things that happened last year, because of the standards, the community standards, that Facebook has, some people had posted the phrase on the Declaration of Independence that referred to Native people as merciless Indian savages, and it got flagged by Facebook. They said no. They actually blocked some people. Not only did they pull the post down, they blocked people for posting language from their Declaration of Independence. And is it a racist comment? Of course it is. But this is where it gets into conflict. I mean, there's plenty of things in the U.S. Constitution and in the foundational documents of the United States, including the Declaration of Independence, that are blatantly racist and they're untrue. Because here's one of the things that always gets missed, and I'm probably going to talk about this on my show in New York this coming week, because I'm actually going to be in New York on the 4th of July. I mean, think about it. Do you know the context that they use this statement, that Native, are referring to us as merciless Indian savages? The context of that phrase was condemning the King of England, who basically saying that he has riled up merciless Indian savages to cause danger for the colonists on the frontiers, which wasn't true. I mean, the United States. I mean, the colonists were trying to elicit help from Native peoples too, and in fact, the Six Nations got caught in the middle of much of this. But the fact of the matter is, the biggest thing that the King of England was trying to do was to stop the conflicts that Native people or that colonists were engaging with Native people. That whole Royal Proclamation of 1768 was to say, no, we don't want you going into Native territory. That is Native territory. Stay out of it. That was part of the reasons for the war, because the colonists said, hell no, we're not going to let the King of England tell us that we can't kill Indians, we can't steal more of their land, which is kind of look. And I'm not trying to sing the praises of Great Britain. Look, they screwed us over pretty good as well. But the context of Jefferson calling us merciless Indian savages was, again, this was let the facts be submitted to a candid world, right? That's the whole basis of the Declaration. We're going to make our case for what that mean old England is doing to us, and they're sicking the merciless Indian savages on us, whose methods of warfare are just a heinous crime, right? That's the context of it. So anyway, I mean, when we talk about some of these racist expressions, I mean, it's interesting. You know, just an aside. The Supreme Court of the United States, which I oftentimes weigh in on, because not only do we have people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who cites like the doctrine of Christian discovery in a case against the Oneidas, but there are three cases, two of which the Supreme Court ruled upon, and they ruled that gerrymandering for politics, for political party gerrymandering, that there's nothing in the Constitution that forbids it. Of course there's nothing in the Constitution that forbids gerrymandering. That's what the whole 3/5 of a slave, of a man thing was about. The idea that they were going to give southern states political representation based on their slaveholding, and they're going to give them, we're going to give you 3/5 of a man credit for all the slaves that you have. Of course, they're never going to vote, and they won't really be representative. We're just going to we're going to gerrymander. You know, this idea of a racist states are going to get a disproportionate number of representation in Congress. So, of course, you know what? The Constitution doesn't forbid kiddie porn either. But that should not be the only test on whether something is right or wrong, because there's plenty that's wrong in the U.S. Constitution. Now, the other two cases, by the way, was they did rule on a case. Whether they could put a citizenship question on the census, and in a 5-4 ruling, they ruled against that, and Trump's still figuring out how he can do that to try to skew the census. The other case that didn't get heard was a case involving native territories, and again, this idea that the federal government is trying to stop Native people from being able to reclaim lands and that kind of stuff. And they actually said, no, we're not going to rule on that. We're going to make them re-argue the whole case next year. There you go. There you go. The disproportionate view that these courts have. And let's be honest here. We haven't done well in the Supreme Court, even with the so-called liberal justices. And, I encourage people to look at my video Legally Invalid, which is what I call the RBG on the DOD, Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Doctrine of Discovery. I encourage people to take a look at it. It's one of my more popular videos, and I think it is clear and gets to the point. And I encourage people to not only watch the video, understand it, look up some of the information. Again, I say this all the time about this show and about the opinions that I express and the facts that I put out there. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. Find out some of this stuff for yourself. And once you hear something, you can either learn more about it and figure out how what you learned can shape your experience going forward. And that's how information becomes knowledge. Because information that is just fed to you doesn't make you any wiser unless you know how to use that information to help you in your decision making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's. I think it's very important for people to start understanding how to learn. I can't emphasize that more, because you take a look at the education system in the U.S. and it's basically just
memorization
and having people recite what they've been told to recite.
Yeah, and because of that, it becomes very indoctrinating in terms of shaping how people view things. And what should be encouraged in terms of education is creativity. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because you oftentimes, even using their metric for success, some of the most successful people are the ones who studied music, yes, or perhaps did some other things that allowed. And even though music is pretty much shaped, it lights up a different part of the brain, the mm-hmm. creative side of the brain. And so, I mean, this is what we should encourage. That's what we should encourage as Native people, the creative side of our people, and not just problem solving. You shouldn't say, well, here's the equation that solves the problem. No, we should encourage people to develop the equations, to develop the problem solving capabilities, because that's what education really is. Education is about problem solving.
And then there's even a point where here's what we can do to prevent that problem. Instead of just having to solve it, we can learn how to prevent things.
Proactive versus reactive. And again, if you understand that a problem may be looming, that perhaps it isn't, look at the climate change issues. People have been looking at understanding that climate change was a real problem for years, and now they've kind of ridden this thing off a cliff, and they're now people are being forced to figure out, well, how do we adapt to climate change? Not how do they prevent climate change. Now we're figuring out how to recover for it. I mean, even local things like the state trying to figure out what they're going to do about the flooding on Lake Ontario, Lockport, and some of these places. You drove it off a cliff, so of course you're going to have a changing water level. You're going to have more and more flooding, and that's a lake. That's not even talking about the ocean, the rising currents of the seas. So. Anyway, Ed, I want to thank you for joining me. I suspect you'll be with us here for a while, and we can have you with every show. All right, and so I appreciate the fact that you're back, and I know those who view the show and listen to the show will appreciate you weighing in. We didn't necessarily have a firm topic this time. I wanted to address the hate issue, but going forward, we'll have a little bit more prep, and we'll be able to have a good debate on some of these issues going forward. I want to thank you for listening. This is John Kane with Ed Schindler, and this is Let's Talk Native. We'll see you in a few days.
Yeah, way.
Nekne satter haren ene asije Chi danser da hunjurna note Deskara gay asat kato Soon haje Nekne satter haren